Hi, writers. Today's question comes from Jennifer, who wants to know, how do we get tension on every page? We've all heard this as writers. Sometimes it's conflict on every page. And I do think that there's a difference between tension and conflict, but they're tied together. So I want to break those down a little bit first. Blake Snyder, author of Save the Cat, defines conflict like this: a character enters a scene with a goal, and standing in their way is an obstacle. That's it. Conflict is whatever makes it harder for the character to achieve their goal. Tension in literature is a little more vague. It's an emotional response from the reader. Think of it in terms of real life tension, that tight, stretched feeling in your belly that puts you on edge. Where conflict occurs, the character should be feeling some of that tension. And if the reader feels it too, then an emotional bond is forged that puts the reader more firmly in the character's corner. This is why tension in the form of worry or uncertainty or a low level fear for the character is valuable. So I want to share some ideas I have for getting tension on every page, but I'm going to approach it a little bit differently. And I want to look at it through the context of character arc. First, you need to know the character's overall goal or their outer motivation, what they're hoping to achieve by the end of the story. As an example, let's say we have a protagonist who's a police officer who is wanting to catch a killer. That's the outer motivation. But that goal doesn't necessarily result in tension. Tension happens when the reader cares about the character and what they're going through. To get the reader to that point, you have to make the stakes high. And the best way to do that is to put something really personal on the line for the protagonist should they fail to achieve their goal. So the second thing you need to figure out is the character's inner motivation. And this is the why behind the story goal. Why is the police officer so intent on catching a killer? If it's just because she's ambitious and she wants to become chief one day, well, who cares? I like to tie the story goal to a missing basic human need because every reader understands human needs. They're universal. And at some point in life, we've all been lacking in love or security or esteem. Those things are really important to us as human beings. So maybe for our cop protagonist, she wants to catch the killer because as a child, she was neglected. And so she lived most of her life without that sense of security. She wants to help others be safe, but really the only way she knows how to feel safe herself is to put away the bad guys. That's what she's going to do. Readers can relate to that why, that need for safety and security. When they see flashbacks and memories from the character's past, they see how wounded and how vulnerable she was, and their heart goes out to her. They automatically want her to succeed so she can maintain that sense of safety. Then when conflict enters the scene and threatens her story goal, it's also threatening her ability to fill that void. So high stakes that are related to a character's inner and outer motivations is vital to create reader tension. But then we need to start looking at things on the scene level, because for our protagonist who wants to catch the killer, there are lots of smaller goals she has to pursue to get there. She may need to gather evidence from the suspect's apartment or win over the police chief who doesn't really like her, or maybe has another favorite within the department. She might have to cozy up to somebody who's close to the suspect to get information. This is how you build your story. Each scene has its own scene level goal, and together all of those goals provide a stepping stone path toward the character achieving the overall objective. It's those scene level goals that provide the most opportunity for tension on every page, because once you know what the scene level goal is, just add appropriate conflict, something that's blocking the protagonist from getting what she wants. When she's blocked, the reader recognizes that both the story goal and the desperate why behind the protagonist's pursuit of it are being threatened. And that is cause for concern and creates tension. So let me wrap up this Q&A with just a few final tips for getting tension on every page. One is to vary the kind of conflict that you're using. Oh, hello, Toby. Everyone, Toby, everyone. Vary your conflict. Don't always fall back on relationship conflict or a ticking clock scenario. You want to mix it up to keep the reader interested. Our conflict thesaurus books that Angela and I wrote break down conflict into 11 categories, and that gives you a variety of scenarios that you can use throughout your story. Number 2, don't underestimate the small stuff. A misunderstanding that causes relationship friction at home, a traffic jam that makes the protagonist miss an important meeting, an injury that requires her to rely on help from someone she doesn't trust or doesn't really like. Remember that effective conflict doesn't need to be explosive and dramatic to build tension. So, how do you get tension on every page? Know your character's story goal. Know that inner motivation, why they're pursuing it. Know the goal for every scene. Add conflict in every scene, and make sure that you vary the kind of conflict that you use. That's going to include minor and major scenarios. I hope you've gotten some help here about how to add meaningful tension into your story. If you've got any other questions about craft or storytelling, please send them in. I'd love to answer them. Happy writing.